I'm Jelly Beans, aka Vincent. I've been playing WoW for as long as I can remember since vanilla. Been competing on a team, the Move, in tournaments for roughly about like 5, 6 years, and competing since Mists of Pandaria. And I play Hunter.
My name is George Velov. I'm a game producer working on the World of Warcraft team. Been playing WoW for a very long time, started in Wrath, but been hooked ever since.
My name is Daniel Achterman. I'm a game designer on the World of Warcraft combat team. I've also been playing World of Warcraft since vanilla. So yeah, longtime player.
All right, so where do you get the inspiration for Dark Ranger to begin with? Like why Dark Ranger and why so much emphasis on like Black Arrow and the whole gist of it, I guess.
So Dark Rangers, like they have a long history in kind of the iconography of WoW, right? Like they're this really like kind of archonic archetype, right? Like dating all the way back to like the Frozen Throne from Warcraft 3 and Sylvanas, and then characters in vanilla like Nathanos Blightcaller, like kind of hanging out over in Eastern Plaguelands. But their flavor and sort of dynamic wasn't really a good fit for the three hunter specs that are, kind of core to the World of Warcraft hunter class. So when we realized that we could use hero talents to kind of introduce these new flavors or like kind of expand like sort of the flavor of classes in WoW, like Dark Ranger was one of the first ones that we turned to that we wanted to do to kind of get that flavor into the game so the players could play with it.
Okay. How do you feel about the talent tree? And also the talents that are in it, like overall, how do you think the talents play a big role in the tree, I suppose? And what are your favorite parts of the talent tree?
Let's see. So the talent tree, yeah, like kind of it has, black arrows up there at the top is kind of the defining hook ability. It's a new rotational ability that you use on an occasional cadence. And then there's a number of other abilities that sort of like hook into that and add some additional effects, some of which you can customize to sort of define how you want your rotation to work, and some of which are sort of like just sort of adding flavor and throughput in different ways, like Withering Fire and Shadow Hounds. I think my favorite talents on the tree, I'm going to say two. I like Death Shade, which gives you a stack of either Death Blow or Hunters of Prey so that you can use Kill Shot, like right after you use Black Arrow. Like I just like that like kind of one punch and two punch of like Black Arrow, Kill Shot. And I'm also really looking forward to Shadow Hounds just because I've always thought that like the Undead Hounds were so cool. And so just kind of occasionally slipping one of those in combat is something I'm looking forward to.
Okay. I actually really like the kill shot part of it too, because when you're using a global on Black Arrow, you're obviously not doing like any damage in the moment, so it's kind of like spacing the globals pretty inefficiently. So getting that kill shot right away is really nice. Just because you have to do so much other stuff on Hunter. You have to trap, you have to use up globals on like trank shotting and stuff like that. So the kill shot is really nice. I agree.
What about you, George?
I mean, I really like Dark Hounds. I love pets in general. I think the idea of a hunter like spawning like a Dark Hound to attack target is really cool. I also like Dark Chains quite a bit. For me, I think one of the goals I really like about hero talents is like being able to visualize, you're doing a role quest or you're doing a battleground and you see someone doing an ability and it's like, oh, right, that's a Keeper of the Grove, that's a Dark Ranger. So something like Dark Chains where it's like, oh yeah, the hunter disengaged and someone got like chained. It's really cool. So things like that are things that resonate with me personally.
Yeah, I think there was actually a talent in Mop that was similar to it, but it rooted instead for like 8 seconds when you disengaged. So it's cool to have that back at some kind of CC when you do disengage.
Yeah.
I personally like smoke screen a lot, I think, because defensively hunters are pretty like that's our weak point, right? We do a lot of damage, but we're like glass cannons, very squishy. So having some sort of utility being a little tankier is nice. I think in PvE and PvP for hunters, that's good. Did you draw any inspiration from like the community when you were creating the talent tree, or?
I'd say with creating Dark Ranger, like a lot of the inspiration from it, like kind of came from the history of the Dark Ranger archetype in World of Warcraft and like some of those key characters. Like that was one of the primary like sort of driving inspirations for the idea is like we're doing this Dark Ranger. There are these famous Dark Ranger characters and this archetype. What does that look like from a player perspective? How can we do that justice, right? So, like we were talking about like Dark Chains, like that being like kind of evoking like Sylvanas' encounter in Shadowlands. And then Shadowhounds is like kind of this reference to Nathanos's like undead hounds that were his pets out in Eastern Plaguelands. Beyond that, like a lot of it was sort of designing a fun hook that would give Dark Ranger gameplay like a unique feel. So, like Black Arrow being a new thing and the effects it took off of it, without that being something that like kind of overwhelms like who you are as like a marksmanship hunter or a beastmaster hunter. You should still feel like the spec that you are, like kind of with Dark Ranger like sort of laid on top of it. And then we wanted to give you some choices about how you want to play, such as like sort of the options between like passive or active gameplay in Darkness Calls versus Shadow Assassin. So that's a lot of the influences that went into it.
Okay. How will you guys think like feedback in terms of like if certain talent choices, or not talent choices, but like in a Dark Ranger tree, if something's maybe too weak or too strong, like how would you go about that accordingly?
I mean, like receiving feedback and acting on it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we discuss player feedback all the time, and we honestly use it as a basis for what we spend our time on. Additionally, we look at data from internal and external sources to figure out exactly what we want to work on, what we want to focus on. I'm gonna, plug the forums here. If you have feedback, highly recommend sort of giving it via the forums. We have, official threads spun up for every single hero class. We'll probably have some of these for Dark Ranger as well as the rest of the Wave 2 hero classes. But if you want to send like a YouTube video or a Reddit thread or, things like that, we love those as well. The only thing I would say is, in general, written feedback is preferred to video feedback. But, we're not going to turn down, a YouTube video either. So all feedback is, always appreciated.
Okay. So one problem hunters have is basically like forced AoE effects. So like in previous expansions, there was Sidewinders in Legion, which just cleaved everything. It like changed your arcane shot. It made it AoE. And then in this expansion, there's a set bonus on your rapid fire that causes like volley, I suppose, to proc when you rapid fire.
Oh, sure.
So in Withering Fire, I think if I remember correctly, when you black arrow, it's like a barrage of dark arrows, right? Is there going to be like some type of like CC protection where it won't break like freezing trap or scatter shot when you do that, or at some point, or how is that going to be designed?
So Withering Fire like fires a volley of arrows at your current target when Black Arrow resets the cooldown of aim shot or barb shot. So like Withering Fire in particular is a single target source of damage. So that's not an example of, I think, the kind of thing that you're talking about, where like sometimes a spec has like sort of some area of effect or cleave like kind of built into their single target rotation. For most specs, we generally do prefer like ability. We like for abilities to have like kind of a clear like single target and AoE roles. But we're not 100% opposed to some AoE abilities that are used in single target rotations, either like just because they have high damage or like the flavor of them. Like, so, examples like I-Beam or Cataclysm. But, something like if you're feeling that you should be doing something like multi-shotting in single target, like that would be a problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, because Black Arrow is at least controlled. So it's not too bad, as opposed to like a Beast Mastery, you have to spec into Stomp, which causes every time you press Barb Shot to AoE. So it's a little tough in PvP for sure. But Black Arrow is not too bad.
Yeah.
Did you draw any inspiration from previous expansions when you were designing the Dark Ranger class tree?
I mean, Black Arrow itself is, historic hunter ability. I really enjoyed playing with it back. I think like Wrath through WAD was when it was last around. But yeah, we draw inspiration from past abilities all the time. Things like Covenants. We didn't take Flayed Shot directly and put it on the Hunter class respect tree, but we made some variations for both BM and MM to sort of still give that passive version of Flayed Shot. So yeah, we draw inspiration from past, systems, class abilities, talents all the time.
Okay. Why Marksman and BM for Dark Rangers specifically in Black Arrow? Because I know historically Survival was the spec that had Black Arrow. And it's awesome that Marksman and BM are getting it because they're more so the range specs now. But just curious on why specifically these two specs were chosen.
I think ultimately, like, a lot of it came down to like kind of its flavor as like a Black Arrow, and so it feeling like more of a flavorful and mechanical fit for the specs that like use range attacks like kind of more more definitionally. A lot of the Dark Ranger characters are very much defined by like, their ranged weaponry, and like Black Arrow being like kind of specifically an arrow, like kind of he plays into a lot of that. So it felt like the best fit for the theme of those specs,
Okay.
with the theme of the hero talent design.
Okay. I noticed one talent, Embrace the Shadows. It heals you for I think 15% shadow damage dealt by you and your pets, right?
Mhm.
How much damage is the Dark Hound expected to do? Like, is it going to actually do enough damage, or the healing is making a noticeable impact on survivability? Because I think I mentioned before, hunter survivability has been very poor for a long time. It's like one of
Sure.
our core weaknesses. So like, and the Black Arrow itself, obviously, because that's also what's affected by the healing, right? So
And so hero talents are like they're in an early stage of tuning, to be sure. Like,
yep.
so I would not be surprised for the damage of Shadow Hounds or Black Arrow to kind of like move up or down, like kind of as we start playing with it and seeing, how the tree shakes out with like kind of hunter damage budget and how strong we want hero talents to be. And so the tuning of Embrace the Shadows could shift as well, like kind of the amount of shadow of healing it gives you, like the percentage of shadow damage that it gives you as healing, like might shift up or down. Ultimately, with hero talents, we want the contribution of their defensive abilities to like be pretty appropriate across the board, right? So we will look at the tuning of Embrace the Shadows and like see how much healing it's given based on the amount of shadow damage that the tree is contributing, and like kind of nudge those numbers up or down to kind of make it an appropriate contribution, especially so that it's comparable to other hunter hero talent trees. Because we want you to feel like you can choose the hero talent tree that you want that matches like the flavor that you like or the gameplay style that you like, without necessarily feeling locked into one because it has like by far and away the best defensive option.
There's going to be also like a baseline talent tree along with the hero talent tree, and these just affect specifically your hero talent, like Black Arrow, or how is?
So the way this sort of works is at 71, you hit 71 and you get a talent point, and you can put that talent point into the hero talent tree. There are 11 sort of total talents, and if you do the math, 10, 11 is going to be mathed out. So you actually get the first sort of keystone for free, in which case this is Black Arrow for Dark Ranger. So 71, you get Black Arrow, you get one talent point that you can put in any of the three columns, and at 80 you get all of them. And it's sort of a separate system from class talent trees. There won't be a lot of like class talents that affect hero talents. So, for example, there won't be a Black Arrow does 20% more damage talent node in like the MM tree. We're not really going for that. But on the flip side, there will be hero talents that affect class talents. We don't really do it a lot in Dark Ranger, but we do it a little bit in like the Frostfire Mage tree, which is also in this wave. So, for example, Frostfire Bolt replaces Fireball for fire or Frostbolt for frost. There are a bunch of talents for Fireball and a bunch of talents for Frostbolt in the spec trees, obviously. So in the case that you have a fireball affecting talent, but you're replacing it with Frostfire Bolts, Frostfire Bolt gains the full benefit of that fireball talent as well. So there's a little bit of cross-pollination, but only from the hero talents going towards the class talents. If that makes sense.
Okay, cool. Um, did you do any previous design outside of these talents, like the class talent trees for Dark Ranger, or?
Yeah, I mean, we go through a bunch of iterations for all the hero talent trees. Can't really speak on those, but
Yeah, of course.
yeah, this is, a culmination of, time spent on figuring out exactly what we feel is appropriate for Dark Ranger, what we feel comfortable sharing with the community, and what we're ready for, folks to get feedback on. Speaking of feedback, that's sort of the goal of these blogs and articles. We want to get as much feedback as possible. That way, when we do get to alpha, we can make sure we hit the ground running and start actioning on everyone's feedback, and sort of making sure that these hero talent trees are the best they can be. So that's kind of why we're doing this so early. I know paper designs only go so far with feedback, but we still feel like it's really fruitful. So
My next question was going to be like, what was the biggest takeaway from previous expansions? Like anything learned that was applied to these trees or anything like that?
yeah, I mean, we iterate on previous expansion sort of fundamentals all the time in terms of sort of takeaways. One thing that we're really trying to accomplish with hero talents is to do, talents in a sort of a new or fresh take. And a large part of that is sort of the design goals that we've narrowed into in terms of what these are. like we mentioned previously, there's like a fixed amount of utility and defensive nodes across the trees, which allows us to ensure that all hero talent trees have both utility and defensive benefit, and there isn't one that sort of is an outlier, whether that's a lot or a little. And like we mentioned earlier, since you're getting everything in the hero talent tree, we have the opportunity to make, talents that aren't necessarily really throughput oriented, but still really flavorful. Like Dark Chains, we know you're getting it. It doesn't compete with a throughput talent, so it gives us more opportunity to make sort of like cool, flavorful stuff for players. And fundamentally, the goal of these is to just sort of like augment players' gameplay. And it's sort of the design space and design constraints they really facilitate that.
Very good. I like that the talent trees aren't just like, oh, Black Arrow, here's a lot of damage on it and offensive utility, but there's really nothing else there. The defensive stuff, especially as a hunter player, that puts so much emphasis on that because it's just years of being too squishy or being the focus target in every single game, every single dungeon you do. You're the only one dead in the group a lot of times. So it's nice to have like this little micro defensives just added subtly onto these talent trees. So it's nice.
I wanted to plus one something that George said about feedback. And also it kind of reminded me about it when you asked about like kind of how the team works together. Like one of the things that I find really valuable about player feedback is hearing from types of players who are not necessarily like I am, right? Like they play the game in a different way, or they play different types of content, or they're playing it at a different level. And so it's super valuable for us to hear from just kind of like a wide swath of players and for people to kind of tell us their stories about how they play the game and the impacts of things like designs or talents or new systems, like kind of on, not just like their rotation or throughput, but also like kind of how they play and how they approach the game. Like that's one of the contributions from everybody on the combat team that I really appreciate is that we all come in with like sort of different perspectives and different ways that we approach the game and different types of content that we do. And so like we're a very collaborative team where like we're just sort of constantly getting feedback from each other as things are in development, and sort of like contributing to different designs and finding different angles on things that people are doing. And so kind of getting these sorts of designs out in front of the community and having more people look at them is like kind of just sort of expanding that effect even more.
Yeah, the design is really cool. Just the theme of Dark Ranger, like you just immediately, first thing that comes to mind is like Sylvanas, right? And then Black Arrow being tied to that, it's like such a nostalgic ability. So it's like you get the nostalgia, and then on top of that, you get to basically be Sylvanas, which like who doesn't want to be Sylvanas, right? So it's pretty cool. Obviously, the balance wise, unsure because I haven't played the expansion, but I mean, balance wise, it'll change, I'd imagine. But overall, the theme is really nice.
Yeah, you'll notice that in this tree there aren't really a lot of like numbers, and that's sort of intentional. Like you mentioned, balance is in flux and tuning is in flux. So we're really sort of looking for like concept feedback. Like, is a Black Arrow that does this really cool? That's sort of the goal of this first pass.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you guys.
Thanks for taking the time to talk with us. Like this was a very cool conversation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys are awesome. I appreciate it.